The small town was buzzing with excitement that evening. People were filing into the old community hall, carrying chairs, blankets, and snacks. The walls were decorated with colorful banners announcing the talent show that had been the talk of the town for weeks. Parents held their children's hands tightly, some hoping their kids would win, others just happy to see the performances. The air smelled faintly of popcorn and old wooden floors, mixed with the excitement of a crowd waiting for something special to happen. Near the front of the room, a boy stood nervously beside a piano. He was no older than 12, with messy hair falling over his forehead and shoes scuffed from countless hours of running around the neighborhood. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the stool to the right height. The piano looked massive to him, its black and white keys gleaming under the bright lights. He had practiced for months, often alone, his fingers stumbling at first but gradually learning to glide across the keys. Tonight all that practice would be put to the test. The boy's parents sat a few rows back, their faces tight with worry. They had encouraged him to participate, but they knew how intimidating it could be. His mother fidgeted with a napkin, chewing her lip, while his father tried to look calm but kept glancing toward the stage. Friends from school whispered to each other, some giving thumbs up and reassuring nods, others snickering quietly, not entirely convinced he could pull this off. At the back of the room, a man who had seen it all before was seated in the best chair. He was well known in the town, a man whose words could make or break reputations. He was a music critic of sorts, though he preferred to call himself a connoisseur of talent. People often joked that he could find a flaw in even the most perfect performance. Tonight he wore a smirk that suggested he was in for a bit of entertainment, ready to judge with his usual sarcasm. As the announcer called the next participant, the boy stepped forward, his small frame almost swallowed by the bright stage lights. A hush fell over the room. Children shifted in their seats and adults leaned forward, curious. The critic's eyes narrowed. He chuckled quietly to himself, shaking his head. Haha, can this kid play the piano? If he could, I'd kneel down and call him a legend, he muttered under his breath, loud enough for a few people nearby to hear. The words hung in the air, half a joke, half a challenge. The boy froze for a moment, hearing the laughter and whisper of doubt. His heart thumped loudly in his chest and he felt the weight of every eye in the room. But then something shifted. He straightened his back, took a deep breath, and reminded himself why he was there. He had worked hard, practiced every day after school, and he knew he could do this. Tonight was his chance to show what he had learned, to prove not just to the audience but to himself that he belonged on this stage. He sat down on the piano bench, his fingers hovering over the keys. The first note he pressed was soft, almost hesitant, but it held a certain warmth. He closed his eyes for a second, letting the music flow from his memory from the hours he had spent alone in his room, imagining a crowd just like this one. The notes began to form a melody, delicate at first, then stronger, more confident. The critic leaned back in his chair, expecting to see mistakes, to witness a child stumble and falter. Instead, he heard something unexpected. The music was clear, precise, and full of feeling. The boy's hands moved faster now, yet each note was perfect, like he was born to play. The audience began to murmur, a ripple of surprise passing through the room. Some people whispered to their neighbors, unsure if they should clap or just sit in awe. The boy's parents' mouths fell open, eyes wide with amazement. They had always known their son was talented, but seeing it live, with everyone watching, was a different feeling entirely. Children in the front row leaned closer, mesmerized by the sounds coming from the piano. They had seen their friend play in the playground in music class, but this was something different. This was magic. They could feel it in their chests, a pull that made them stop talking, stop moving, just listen. The notes filled the room, bouncing off the walls and ceiling, wrapping around every person there. The boy's expression was a mixture of concentration and joy. He was no longer nervous. He was lost in the music, letting it carry him. His fingers danced across the keys, moving with a confidence that belied his age. Each chord, each trill told a story of practice, patience, and passion. He wasn't playing for the critic or the audience or even for the applause. He was playing for himself, for the music itself. Meanwhile, the critic's smirk slowly faded. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his hands, eyes wide. He had seen countless performers in his life, but this boy was different. There was something raw, something real about the way he played. It wasn't just technique. It was emotion, it was honesty. It was life itself being poured out through the piano keys. For the first time in a long while, the critic found himself speechless, unable to utter a single sarcastic word. The room seemed to shrink as the music grew louder, more intricate. People forgot to breathe for a moment, caught in the spell the boy was weaving. The notes rose and fell like waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes crashing, each one telling a piece of a story they couldn't yet name. Some in the audience felt tears prick their eyes, moved by a depth of feeling they hadn't expected from someone so young. The boy's hands moved faster now, not because he wanted to impress, but because the music demanded it. Every mistake he had ever made in practice had been a lesson, shaping him into this moment. Every late night, every frustrated sigh, every dropped note had led him here to this stage, to this piano, to this exact performance. As the last few notes echoed into silence, the room remained still for a heartbeat, almost afraid to break the spell. Then slowly, applause began to build, quiet at first, then louder and louder until the entire hall was clapping, cheering, and stomping. People jumped to their feet, unable to contain their excitement. The boy opened his eyes, looking around at the smiling faces, the clapping hands, the wide eyes of amazement. He felt a warmth spread through him, a mix of relief and pride. The critic, who had doubted him from the start, rose from his seat. He walked slowly toward the boy, a mixture of awe and respect on his face. The smirk had disappeared completely, replaced by a genuine, almost childlike admiration. He knelt down just as he had jokingly said he would, and whispered words that no one else could hear but that would stay with the boy forever. The boy's heart raced, not from nerves this time, but from the understanding that he had truly been seen, truly appreciated for the talent he had nurtured in secret. Outside the hall, people continued to talk about what they had just witnessed. Parents hugged their children, friends high-fived, and the story of the boy who had played the piano like a legend began to spread. The boy walked off the stage, his small hands still tingling from the keys, his mind racing with excitement. He knew this was only the beginning, that there would be more challenges, more audiences, more critics, but for now, he let himself feel proud, let himself bask in the moment that had been so hard-won. That night, as he lay in bed, he replayed the music in his head, each note a memory of the courage it took to sit down and play. He smiled, thinking of the critic kneeling in front of him, of the gasps and claps, of the magic that had filled the room. He knew that he had started something, that he had shown the world a small piece of what he could do. And deep down he felt a promise to himself. He would keep playing, keep learning, and maybe, just maybe, one day, he would be the legend that the critic had joked about, a legend of his own making. The next morning, the boy woke up early, even before the sun had fully risen. The excitement from the night before had not faded. It had grown inside him like a small fire, warming his thoughts and filling him with energy. He lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, remembering the applause, the smiles, and the astonished face of the critic. It all felt surreal, like a dream that he wasn't sure he could hold on to. But when he rubbed his eyes and sat up, he realized it had all been real. He had played, and he had been heard. His parents were already in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of toasted bread and fresh fruit filled the house. They were quieter than usual, but their eyes kept darting to him, filled with pride and something else, wonder at how quickly their shy, nervous boy had transformed into someone people admired. They didn't say much at first, but when he walked in, his mother reached out and gave him a tight hug. "You were amazing last night," she whispered. His father nodded, smiling widely. "I knew you could do it. School that day was different." The hallways, once filled with ordinary chatter and shoving, felt electric. Friends ran up to him, slapping him on the back, asking questions about last night, trying to hear every detail. Some kids were shy, almost in awe, and others were bold, teasing in a friendly way, but with a spark of respect. Everyone wanted to know how it felt to play in front of so many people, to hear claps and gasps and whispers of awe. The boy tried to answer, but no words seemed to capture it. It was more than applause, it was something inside him that had shifted. During lunch, a few classmates gathered around, pulling him into conversation. They asked if he was going to play again, if he had learned a new song, if he wanted to join the school concert. He smiled, trying to be casual, but inside he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He knew he wanted to play more, but the memory of the critic's skeptical laugh still echoed in his mind. He wanted to prove that the music he created wasn't a fluke, that he wasn't just lucky. He wanted people to see him as more than just a kid who had once made a critic kneel in surprise. After school, he went to the piano teacher's studio. The teacher, A kind but strict woman had been the first to believe in him. She had spent hours guiding his fingers, correcting mistakes and nurturing his confidence. Today she watched him carefully, a small smile playing on her lips as he walked in. "Ready to show me what you've been thinking about since last night?" she asked. He nodded, taking his place at the piano. His fingers brushed over the keys lightly at first, testing the air, testing himself. Then slowly he began to play, a soft melody that started simple but grew richer with each note. The teacher leaned closer, her eyes attentive, noticing every subtle movement of his hands. The music was different from last night, more daring, more experimental. He was no longer just playing what he had practiced. He was exploring, discovering, finding new ways to make the piano sing. Time seemed to pass quickly. Hours melted into minutes as he played, lost in the music. Every so often he paused, listening, thinking, adjusting. He experimented with rhythms, tried faster sequences, and worked on dynamics that he hadn't dared to try before. The teacher offered gentle corrections, but mostly she watched him, proud of the courage he showed. He was learning to trust himself, to believe that the music was not just something he performed for others, but something he could create freely. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the boy's parents decided to take him to the community hall again. They wanted to show him a small reward, a way to honor what he had accomplished. Walking through the familiar doors, he felt a rush of memories, the lights, the stage, the audience's faces, the critic kneeling before him. It was almost like walking back into a different world, a world where his music mattered, where people listened not just with their ears but with their hearts. He sat down at the piano once more. The keys felt familiar under his fingers, like old friends waiting to be spoken to. He played softly at first, then louder, letting his emotions guide each note. The room, empty except for his parents, seemed to respond. The echoes bounced around the walls, and for a moment it felt as though the world had stopped, waiting for him to finish. His parents watched silently, tears gathering in their eyes as they realized that this small, quiet boy had found a voice that could move people, a voice that was truly his own. The boy stopped, breathing heavily, his hands still hovering over the keys. His parents rushed to him, hugging him tightly. "You don't know how proud we are," his mother said, voice trembling. His father smiled, holding him at arm's length to look at his face. "We always believed in you, but seeing you play like this, it's something else." That night the boy went to bed feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had played twice today, once in school with classmates asking questions, and once in the quiet hall, exploring and experimenting. His mind raced with possibilities. He imagined playing for bigger audiences, performing in front of more people, and maybe even traveling to places he had only seen in pictures. The thought made him both nervous and excited. He knew it would take work, and there would be challenges, but the fire that had started inside him was growing stronger. As he drifted to sleep, he thought about the critic. He could still hear the words, half joking, half daring. "Ha ha ha, can this kid play the piano? If he could, I'd kneel down and call him a legend." The boy smiled. Maybe he didn't feel like a legend yet, but he was beginning to understand something important. Talent was just the beginning. Courage, practice, and believing in himself were what made a performer truly unforgettable. And he was ready to keep going, to see where this music could take him, one note at a time. The boy woke up the next morning feeling a new kind of excitement. He could still remember the applause from the talent show, the amazed faces in the crowd, and the critic kneeling in front of him. It felt like a dream he didn't want to end, and yet it was very real. He had discovered a world that seemed larger than before, a world where his music could touch people's hearts. He dressed quickly, his hands moving almost automatically, thinking about the piano and what he could learn today. At school, whispers followed him everywhere. Some students waved excitedly, some nodded respectfully, and others stared in awe. He had become someone people looked at differently, not just as a boy who liked music, but as a musician. The boy tried to act normal, but his mind was buzzing with ideas. He thought about the song he had played, how he could add more emotion, more depth, more life. Every class he sat through, every lesson he attended, he kept thinking about music, about the piano, and about what it could do. During lunch, a few of his closest friends gathered around him. "You're amazing," one whispered. "I can't believe what you did last night," said another. The boy smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and shyness. He wanted to tell them how much practice had gone into it, how many nights he had spent learning and failing and learning again. But he realized they didn't need to know all of that. They only needed to see the music, to feel it, and somehow they already did. After school, the boy went straight to his piano teacher's studio. The teacher greeted him warmly. "I heard about last night," she said, her eyes shining. "Everyone is talking about you." The boy laughed nervously. "I just played the way I always do," he said. But even to himself, he knew it was more than that. Last night had changed something inside him. He felt braver, more confident, more connected to the music he loved. He sat down at the piano, letting his fingers rest lightly on the keys. He played the first few notes softly, almost testing the air, feeling how the music would flow today. Then gradually he allowed himself to play louder, faster, more boldly. He experimented with rhythms he had never tried before, creating combinations of sounds that surprised even him. His teacher watched, nodding with approval. "You're starting to find your own style," she said. "That's the most important thing." Hours passed like minutes. The boy played song after song. Some he had learned, some he was inventing on the spot. He felt the music flowing through him, guiding him, helping him find new ideas. Every mistake was a lesson, every success a small victory. By the time he finally stopped, his fingers tingled and his mind felt alive with possibilities. He had discovered that music was not just notes on a page, but a way to express everything he felt inside. That evening, the boy and his parents returned to the community hall. This time it was empty, quiet, and still. The piano sat in the same place, waiting, almost like it knew he would come back. He sat down again, letting his fingers hover over the keys. He played slowly at first, then faster, weaving melodies that were soft and sweet, then strong and bold. The empty hall seemed to echo every note, giving it life and depth. His parents watched in silence. They didn't need to say anything. They could see the boy's connection to the music, the way he poured himself into every note. His mother's eyes were wet with tears, not of sadness but of awe and pride. His father's chest rose and fell with excitement, remembering the shy boy who had once struggled to play a simple song. Now he was creating music that could touch anyone who heard it. As he played, the boy's mind wandered to the critic. He remembered the words, the laughter, and the surprise. He realized that what had impressed the critic was not just his skill, but his courage, his willingness to take a chance and be seen. The boy smiled, thinking that maybe it wasn't about proving anyone else right or wrong. Maybe it was about finding his own voice and sharing it, letting the music speak for him. He played for hours, experimenting with new melodies, rhythms, and harmonies. Each note was a discovery, each song a journey. He felt the music in his chest, in his hands, and in his mind. It was alive, growing, shaping itself through him. He began to see patterns and possibilities he had never noticed before, and with each new idea he felt a surge of excitement. Later that night, the boy sat at his desk, writing down his ideas. He sketched out the songs he had played, marking notes and rhythms, writing reminders to himself. He wanted to remember every detail, every feeling. He knew that music was more than just playing. It was creating, experimenting, and sharing, and he wanted to do it all, to keep exploring, to see how far he could go. He thought about the future, about bigger audiences, more performances, and new challenges. He felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. He knew there would be difficult moments, times when he would make mistakes, when he might feel unsure. But he also knew that the music inside him was strong, that it would guide him, and that each note he played was a step forward. As he lay in bed that night, the boy felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had played, he had explored, and he had discovered more of what he could do. He thought about the critic, about the audience, and about the people who had believed in him. But most of all, he thought about himself and the joy of playing the piano, of creating something beautiful, of sharing it with the world. He closed his eyes, imagining the notes floating in the air, each one a piece of his heart, a piece of his story, a piece of the boy who was beginning to understand that music could make him, and others, feel alive. The following day, the boy woke with a sense of anticipation. Unlike anything he had felt before, the talent show had already given him a glimpse of what his music could do, but today he felt ready to take it further. His mind buzzed with ideas, melodies, and rhythms, each one begging to be played. He hurried to the piano, his fingers already itching to touch the keys. The morning sunlight spilled into the room, highlighting the edges of the piano and casting long shadows across the wooden floor. He started to play slowly, each note deliberate and clear. But soon, the music began to flow faster, weaving complex patterns that seemed to dance through the air. He experimented with dynamics, playing soft then loud, slow then fast, creating waves of sound that filled the room. His parents listened from the doorway, quiet but wide-eyed. They had never heard anything like this. They knew their son was talented, but now it felt as though they were witnessing the birth of something extraordinary. Word of the boy's performance had spread throughout the town. By mid-morning, a small crowd had gathered outside the piano studio, people curious to hear the music that everyone was talking about. The boy played without noticing them at first, lost in the notes, shaping melodies with a kind of instinctive skill that only comes from long hours of dedication and love for what you do. The crowd leaned closer to the windows, mesmerized, whispering to each other about the sound that floated through the air. Among the onlookers was the critic, who had returned to see the boy again. His expression was a mixture of curiosity and cautious optimism. He had been wrong to doubt the boy before, and now he wanted to see the full extent of the talent he had witnessed. The boy didn't notice him at first, focused entirely on the music. As the critic watched, he realized that what had impressed him the most was not just the technical skill, but the emotion, the honesty, and the courage with which the boy played. Hours passed, and the boy continued to explore, creating new pieces and revisiting old ones. Each song was different, some joyful, some sorrowful, some playful, others serious. The audience outside remained captivated, drawn to the music without fully understanding why it affected them so deeply. The boy's parents occasionally brought refreshments, but mostly they stayed silent, allowing him to inhabit his world of sound and expression. By afternoon, the critic stepped closer, now standing just inside the doorway. The boy finally noticed him and paused briefly, unsure how to react. The critic smiled and nodded encouragingly, silently giving him permission to continue. The boy took a deep breath and resumed, his confidence bolstered by the quiet acknowledgement of someone he had once feared. The music that flowed from the piano now carried a new energy, one that seemed to speak directly to the hearts of those listening. The critic's expression changed as he listened. He realized that this boy was more than a talented performer. He was an artist, the kind of artist who could make people feel, think, and remember. There was a purity in the way the boy played, a truthfulness that could not be taught, only discovered within oneself. The critic knew that this was a moment he would never forget, a performance that would stay with him for the rest of his life. As the day wore on, more people gathered, including local teachers, friends, and neighbors. Each person was drawn in by the music, unable to resist the pull of the boy's talent. He played without hesitation, without fear, his hands moving with both precision and emotion. The notes seemed to weave a story, one that transcended words and touched something deep in everyone who listened. Even the people who had been skeptical before were now silent, captivated by the sound and the presence of the young musician. Evening came, and the crowd outside had grown, but the boy continued to play, completely absorbed in his music. His parents stood close, marveling at how he had grown in confidence, skill, and creativity. The critic knelt in front of him, just as he had once joked he would, a gesture of respect and admiration that the boy would never forget. The boy smiled, feeling a sense of connection and validation, not from the audience, not from the critic, but from the music itself. He had discovered the power it held, the joy it could bring, and the courage it demanded. By the time the final note rang out, the audience erupted into applause. The boy stood slightly trembling, but filled with pride and joy. People cheered, clapped, and some wiped tears from their eyes. The critic finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "You have a gift," he said. "Not just skill, but something deeper. You play with your heart, and that is rare. That is what makes you a true artist." The boy's parents embraced him, their hearts full. They knew this was a turning point, a moment that would shape the boy's future in ways they could not yet fully understand. Later, the boy sat alone at the piano, reflecting on the day. The applause, the admiration, the surprise, it all felt amazing. But he realized that the most important part was the music itself. The way it had flowed through him, the way it had connected him to everyone listening, was something he had never experienced before. He knew that this was only the beginning, that there would be more challenges, more opportunities, more moments of doubt and discovery. But he also knew that he had found his path, his voice, and that he was ready to follow it wherever it might lead. As he turned off the piano and left the hall, he felt a sense of calm and purpose. The day had shown him that talent alone was not enough, that courage, persistence, and passion were equally important. He had discovered not only the power of music but also the strength within himself to share it with the world. And in that quiet moment, he made a promise to himself. He would continue to play, to grow, to explore, and to touch the hearts of everyone who heard his music. The boy woke up early that morning with a sense of excitement and purpose. He had grown so much since his first performance, and he felt ready for a new challenge. Today he would play in front of a larger audience. This was a special invitation from the town's cultural center, where local musicians and families had gathered for an afternoon of music. The boy felt a mixture of nerves and joy, his heart beating quickly as he imagined the room filled with people waiting to hear him. He quickly got dressed and ate a simple breakfast with his parents. They gave him encouraging smiles, though they could sense the anxiety hidden behind his calm exterior. "Just play from your heart," his father said. "That's all anyone needs." His mother added, "Remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about sharing your music." The boy nodded. He had learned this lesson over the past weeks. Talent was important, but connection and emotion were what truly mattered. When they arrived at the cultural center, the boy's eyes widened. The room was bigger than the community hall, with rows of chairs stretching across the space and a grand piano gleaming under the soft stage lights. People were already taking their seats, chatting and laughing, unaware of the extraordinary performance about to take place. The boy felt a brief wave of doubt. Could he really play in a space this big? But he took a deep breath, remembering the first time he had faced a skeptical audience and the critic who had doubted him. That memory gave him courage. The event began and various performers played their pieces. Some were talented, some average, but the audience was polite and supportive. Finally, it was the boy's turn. As he walked onto the stage, he felt the familiar rush of nerves. He sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and rested his fingers lightly on the keys. The room quieted instantly, sensing that something special was about to happen. He began with a soft, gentle melody. The notes floated through the air, delicate and precise. The audience leaned forward, captivated by the boy's skill and the emotion in his playing. He could see faces soften, eyes closing, people swaying slightly to the rhythm. He felt a connection with everyone in the room, an unspoken understanding that music could reach where words could not. As he continued, the music grew bolder. His fingers danced across the keys, faster now, with confidence and flair. He added his own improvisations, exploring harmonies and rhythms that he had created in private. The sound filled the room, resonating through the walls, and he could feel it vibrating in his chest. The audience was mesmerized. Some were smiling, some were silent in awe, and a few even had tears in their eyes. The boy's heart swelled with the knowledge that he was touching people in a profound way. Halfway through his performance, he reached a challenging part, a fast sequence of notes that required focus and precision. His hands moved fluidly, trained by hours of practice, but his mind was calm. He trusted himself, trusting that the music would flow naturally. And it did. Each note landed perfectly, creating a cascade of sound that thrilled the audience. He felt exhilarated not by their reaction but by the joy of playing, of creating something beautiful in that exact moment. The critic was in the front row, watching intently. He had followed the boy's journey, intrigued by how a child could captivate a crowd so effortlessly. He leaned forward, eyes wide, seeing the growth and artistry in the boy's playing. It wasn't just skill or speed. It was the emotion, the storytelling, the honesty in every note. The critic felt something rare, genuine awe. He realized that this boy, who had once been underestimated, was now an artist in every sense of the word. The boy transitioned to a slower, more emotional piece, allowing the audience to experience the depth of feeling he could convey. Each chord was deliberate, each pause filled with meaning. People were leaning in, completely absorbed. He felt their emotions mirror his own, a silent conversation through music. Some people closed their eyes, some held hands with loved ones, and some simply sat, moved in a way they hadn't expected. The boy smiled slightly, feeling the power of music to connect and heal. As the performance continued, the boy played a piece he had composed himself. This was a story in music reflecting his journey, from nervous uncertainty to confident expression, from private practice to public admiration. Every note carried emotion, every chord had purpose. The audience was completely entranced. Some whispered quietly, unable to believe the talent before them. Others sat in awe, knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary. The boy felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He wasn't just performing. He was sharing a piece of his soul. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The boy's fingers moved tirelessly, yet gracefully. He played with focus and joy, his mind fully immersed in the music. Finally, he reached the last piece, a soft and contemplative melody. The room was silent, hanging on each note. As he played the final chord, the sound lingered in the air, and for a heartbeat there was complete stillness. Then slowly applause erupted, growing louder and louder, filling the room with energy and excitement. The boy stood slightly trembling, but with a beaming smile. The audience cheered, some clapping repeatedly, some shouting words of admiration. The critic stood as well, clapping and smiling genuinely. He approached the boy, kneeling slightly as a sign of respect, and whispered, "You have grown into an extraordinary musician. Your music tells stories and touches hearts. You are a true artist." The boy's chest swelled with pride, not from the praise, but from the understanding that he had accomplished what he set out to do. He had shared his music in the most genuine way possible. After the performance, the boy's parents hugged him tightly. They were proud, not just of his skill, but of the courage, dedication, and passion he had shown. Friends and family surrounded him, congratulating and encouraging him. People from the community approached, asking if they could watch him play again, if he would perform at other events. The boy felt a sense of responsibility and excitement. He realized that music could create connections, inspire people, and bring joy in ways he had never imagined. That night at home, the boy sat at his piano once more. The house was quiet, the city outside calm. He played softly, reflecting on the day. He remembered the nervousness he had felt at the start, the growing confidence, the energy of the audience, and the praise of the critic. But most importantly, he remembered the music itself, the joy of creating, the connection to people, the storytelling through sound. He understood that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more performances, and more growth. But he was ready. As he finished his final piece and rested his hands on the keys, he felt a sense of peace and purpose. Music had become a part of him, a voice he could use to reach others, a way to share his emotions and experiences. He knew that as long as he continued to play, to practice, and to believe in himself, he could inspire, connect, and bring beauty to the world. And with that thought, he smiled, closed the piano lid gently, and went to bed, dreaming of the melodies he had yet to create, the audiences he had yet to touch, and the journey that lay ahead. The boy woke early that morning, feeling a mix of excitement and anticipation that was stronger than ever before. Over the past weeks, he had grown more confident, more skilled, and more connected to the music he loved. Today was different. He was going to play in front of an even larger audience, a regional talent showcase that had musicians from neighboring towns, and even some from faraway cities. His parents helped him prepare, making sure he had everything he needed, and reminding him gently that the most important thing was to play from his heart. As they arrived at the showcase, the boy's eyes widened. The hall was grand, with high ceilings, polished wooden floors, and rows of seats stretching far back. Bright lights shone on the stage, highlighting a beautiful grand piano at the center. People were already filling the seats, chatting and moving about, but there was an air of anticipation. Musicians were tuning instruments, organizers were checking schedules, and the boy felt the nerves building again. He took a deep breath, remembering all the practice, the small victories, and the applause that had carried him this far. Backstage, he waited quietly, watching other performers finish their pieces. Some were older, more experienced, but he did not let that intimidate him. Instead, he reminded himself that music was about expression, not competition. The critic who had once doubted him had become a source of inspiration, and his words of respect echoed in the boy's mind. "You are an artist. Your music tells stories and touches hearts." Those words reminded him that this was his chance to share, not to impress. Finally, his name was called. The boy walked onto the stage, feeling the bright lights on his face and the expectant gazes of hundreds of people. He approached the piano, adjusted the bench, and rested his hands lightly on the keys. For a brief moment, silence enveloped the hall. Then he began to play. The first notes were soft, delicate, and filled with emotion. The audience leaned forward, captivated as the music unfolded with depth and feeling that seemed beyond his years. As he played, his confidence grew. He moved through each piece with a balance of precision and expression, adding flourishes and improvisations that drew audible gasps from the audience. His fingers flew over the keys effortlessly, yet every note carried meaning. People were silent, completely absorbed in the music. Some closed their eyes, feeling the melody resonate within them. Others leaned toward friends and whispered in awe. The boy felt a sense of connection he had never felt before. Through the piano, he was speaking directly to each person, telling stories, evoking emotions, and sharing his journey. Midway through his performance, he reached a particularly difficult passage. It required speed, control, and emotional depth. The boy's fingers danced across the keys, each movement deliberate and precise. For a moment, he felt a surge of adrenaline, the kind that comes when you are fully alive in what you are doing. The audience seemed to hold their breath, and when the final note of that passage rang out, the room erupted in applause. The boy smiled, not because of the claps, but because he had challenged himself and succeeded. The critic, seated in the front row, watched intently. His expression was a mixture of pride and amazement. He had seen many performances, but this boy's talent, combined with courage and emotion, was something rare. The critic knew that this moment was significant, not just for the boy, but for everyone in the audience who had been touched by the music. He made notes in his mind about how to share this young talent with the world. Knowing that this was only the beginning, the boy continued, moving seamlessly from fast, energetic pieces to slower, more contemplative melodies. He explored different genres, showing versatility and depth. The audience remained silent, captivated by the skill and passion in every note. Some people wiped tears from their eyes, others smiled quietly, lost in the beauty of the performance. The boy felt the power of music as a bridge between people, a language that transcended words and created understanding. Hours seemed to pass like minutes as he played. Every time he thought he had given everything he could, a new idea would emerge, a new pattern of notes, a new way to express emotion. His heart raced with excitement and his mind felt clear and alive. He was no longer nervous. He was immersed, present in every moment of the music. The audience could feel it too, responding with subtle movements, nods, and quiet expressions of awe. When he finally reached the last piece, he chose a composition he had created himself, a story told entirely in music. It began softly, almost like a whisper, building gradually into a rich, full melody that carried joy, sorrow, hope, and triumph. The audience was captivated, leaning forward, holding their breath, and experiencing the story through the boy's fingers. Each note was a word, each chord a sentence, and together they formed a narrative that touched every listener. As the final note faded into silence, there was a heartbeat of stillness. Then the hall erupted with applause, cheers, and standing ovations. People clapped, shouted encouragement, and some wept quietly, moved by the music they had just heard. The boy stood slightly trembling, but with a broad smile. He had shared everything he had, and it had been received with love and admiration. The critic rose as well, clapping